My colleague Rahul Tandon has been speaking to people in South Africa about their own experiences of xenophobia or hostility to foreigners in the country. You're about to hear a conversation between Babatunde and Ayanda. They're a young couple. They've been together for 4 years. Babatunde is Nigerian. Ayanda is South African. Their names have been changed for their own protection. They were joined by Malaika, who's Ghanaian and American woman in South Africa, beginning then with Babatunde on how he met his partner Ayanda.
Interesting story. So we actually met back in uni. So much younger. I was in my second or third year, and then she was in her first. And I mean, you can probably hear the smile in my voice now, but it was like a really typical movie type scene. I saw her. I was actually with a friend, and we were trying to recruit people for like a society we were running. And so we kind of walked up to her, and she was with another friend of hers. And you do what guys try to do, keep it smooth. And that was when we first met. But then we actually only started dating 2 years later. And it was the same friend that I met her with that kind of brought that together. So it was like a typical love story.
Do you know what? I love it. I can hear the smile in your voice.
Exactly.
Now, here's the moment of truth. Ayanda, do you have the same smile in your voice?
I do, actually. I do.
But here we are. You're obviously Babatunde of Nigerian heritage. Ayanda, you're of South African heritage. Ayanda, did you... love is something, you don't think of those things at that time. But did you ever think it was going to make the relationship complicated?
I mean, I did know that, things were going to be awkward with my family. But no, not complicated, no.
Let us bring Malaika into the conversation. Malaika, how would you describe yourself?
So I am Ghanaian American.
Okay.
But I consider myself a daughter of the entire continent.
Nice. You've been in South Africa for 10 years. Let's get into the experiences of all of you. Malaika, let's start with you. Has that changed those experiences? Tell me what it's like today.
For me, it is about the same. I have the same anxieties around certain things. But I'll say honestly, being a Ghanaian in the country really wasn't that much of an issue. Other foreign nationals really do catch much more, for lack of a better word, catch much more hell than we have. Nigerians, Eritreans, and Somalians, I feel have been subjected to more attack just because there are certain narratives that surround their personhood in the countries that they come from. So for me, my experience hasn't been that different. To be honest, these most recent attack on Ghanaians really shocked me because we were singled out specifically. And we all know that foreign nationals can be subjected to attack at any time. But the specificity of it, I think, is what was very, very shocking for me.
Babatunde, we heard Malaika there talking about Nigerians in particular. That is who you are. Tell me about what it is like today. Are you scared?
Man, so I've been in South Africa now for the past 17 years myself. And I mean, I came here as a much younger kid, did pretty much primary school, right through high school and university. Currently, I have to be honest and say that I am quite afraid, right? Because the climate is quite tense. Naturally, I'm sure as the news is reporting on just globally and locally as well. And so my fear is, what is the turning point, right? Like the challenge that I think, and Malaika also highlighted that as well, is there are certain issues that one can understand justify certain anxieties and problems with foreign nationals, such as illegal status, XYZ. I mean, I understand the genesis of frustration in that context. However, what is now currently happening is the term all is being used. And I think that's kind of where the shifting point is, right? So there is a fear that's definitely attached to that, because whether you're legal, illegal, whether you're in nefarious business or pure, proper trade, it just seems to be there's a blanket that's being thrown on all foreigners, which I think is really concerning.
Yeah. And for you, what does that mean? What are some of the experiences that you've faced?
Naturally, due to the area that we live in the country, just pure geography, right? Like we aren't, those attacks haven't been quite frequent. in this area, this region specifically, even where I grew up. And so obviously I have to, though, be honest and say that there has been certain circumstances where certain slurs were used or certain terms were used where, someone didn't know that I understand the local language. And so I would have picked up on it in that way. But I wouldn't want to come on and say there's been any direct attacks, physically towards me in any way. But I definitely know a lot of people who have experienced that as well. So even if it hasn't been direct, the indirect experience itself can be very traumatizing too.
Of course it can. And it leads to fear, doesn't it, Ayanda?
Definitely.
And when you guys go out together, do you think carefully about where you go? Now, do people know straight away that Babatunde is of Nigerian heritage?
No, I don't think they do. But yeah, we do think about that. I mean, it is a concern, especially now, how things are in the country. So yeah, places like the clubs and stuff, we don't go to those places because of how things are now. So we're very aware of the situation. So we try not to put ourselves in those types of environments.
Do you worry when he's out on his own?
I do. I'm always texting him like, send me your location, share your location with me, and tell me when you're home or call me. So yeah, I do worry about him. Yeah.
Malika, you said there, you've seen changes taking place, and I suppose the danger is it gets worse, doesn't it?
I think that it will get worse, but I'm hopeful that, like a fever, it'll break and then there'll be some change. I am encouraged by some of the conversations that are being had by other South Africans who recognize that, these are violations of human rights and quite frankly, against the law. It is illegal activity to attack anyone on the streets and even to demand their paperwork. I mean, it really harkens back to the apartheid era where, the police would stop you and ask for your pass. Do we really want to go back to that? And I'm hopeful that with these kinds of conversations that people will recall the horror of that. And even if it does get worse and come to a head, that will hopefully begin the process of us getting back on a track of having a united continent.
And I think that's an important point that you make there, because we had that video, didn't we, of the Ghanaian man who was stopped, who was raised by the Ghanaian government and asked to prove his identity. Babatunde, you sound, I have to say this, like one of the most cheerful people that I have spoken to in a very long period of time, and it is great talking to you. But you've talked about your fears. If it does get worse, and I know you're in a part of South Africa where it hasn't been so bad, but it will come to the point for some Nigerians where they think, is it worth staying in this country? Are people having those conversations?
We're having that conversation within the family, to be honest, brother. And so these conversations are happening on the group chat. I mean, my sister the other day was asking me, what are my thoughts around the UK? And obviously we have family there as well, the US. And as much as I'll be honest. I mean, Ayanda is here and I know her family. Obviously, we intend on starting a family ourselves one day. So it isn't something I would love to do. I mean, I love South Africa. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people, just culture. But just like I said earlier, looking at where things are going and the climate, I'm leaning towards possibly exploring what it looks like outside of the country. And I hate even having to say that because my spirit shifts every time I say it. Now, on the flip side, what I do also want to say is also echo what Malika is saying, is that there is always a breaking point, and hopefully we reach that point, right, pretty soon, where people then kind of look at the situation and say, you know what, maybe we're looking at this wrong, right? And someone was saying this the other day, that these attacks happen on a 10-year cycle. It's almost like a 10, 15-year cycle, right? 2008 was really the last really big one that happened. And so we kind of see these 10 to 15-year it's always an issue, kind of ongoing. And I think, maybe Malika could also speak to that too. But then what then happens is you have a massive outburst and it simmers down. And so I'm hoping that we eventually get to having the discussion so that I don't have to leave eventually,
I'm going to put this to Malika first, and then Babatunde, if you want to pick up off the back of it. We've talked about the problems. You've been very honest in your own experiences, how it's affecting the way that you think of where you're living, which is extremely sad. What needs to be done to make sure that this doesn't get any worse? Malika first.
I think education. I think that the government really needs to do a much better job of explaining to the people, first of all, admitting the government's failures, because really at the core of all of this is people are dissatisfied with their South African experience. And so you have locals who see people like myself and Babatunde who come here, who've been able to carve out a relatively good life. And as an indigent, why should that life be out of reach? And it really does come down to a failure of the government to provide the resources, the education, the infrastructure for people to live a dignified life. I mean, it's shocking that people in 2026 are still living in shacks right now. It's the winter season, and it's called fire season because many shacks, thousands of shacks every year go up in flames just because people are trying to keep themselves warm. So really accountability from the government and education and an insistence on not scapegoating these immigrants, these migrants, many of whom are here legally. And even if they are here illegally, sometimes that's a process that's a administration failure on the government side. They're understaffed. You know, you go to Home Affairs, for example, the systems are down. These are things that lead to your paperwork being out of date, and therefore, leading to you having an illegal status. But I love something that the president did during the pandemic, and that was our family chats and our roundtable discussions. If he can do the same thing with this immigration problem and the xenophobic attacks, I think that would be a good first step.
I love what Malika was saying there about really focusing on the core issues, because at the end of the day, we need to ask the hard question, which is, if all foreigners were to leave South Africa, will that necessarily improve the economic situation currently in the country? And I think, most people listening to this will know that the answer to that question is no, because at the core of it, the issue isn't necessarily all these people who are currently here, but it's that there isn't a market that has been built to absorb the number of graduates who are coming out of schools. And South Africa has a really good education system, right? But now the challenge is, obviously historically, and we could go into that at another time, has led to a lot of people not being able to access these opportunities. And so that's kind of really where the conversation needs to be. And my fear and sadness now is that it's completely being focused on something that isn't going to lead or yield any real return. And now the fear then becomes, so this other issue is still building up, right? Higher unemployment, higher levels of inequality, higher levels of poverty, but we're focusing on getting rid of foreigners, right? And so it really then, and I mean, like I said, Ayanda is someone who I want to start a family with. So my children are going to have shared heritage. So it isn't like I'm looking at this discussion as an outsider, pointing my finger at it. I'm genuinely invested in the well-being of this country.
There is legal migration, illegal migration. Do you understand the concerns about people coming in illegally?
Yes, that is a big issue, right? And I'm going to say this, right? And it might be a bit inflammatory or just, tricky, but I quite understand that frustration, right? Like I said earlier, I understand the frustration that South Africans have regarding illegal status, and on top of that, nefarious business dealings whilst under that illegal status. I mean, anybody in any country, Nigerians ourselves, have an issue with that as much as, over the years. I know there's been, someone says Nigeria has a bad branding issue, someone that I'm quite close to. So I understand how individuals have also played a role in building that narrative. Notwithstanding, I think justifying that to then say we're going to be violent towards those same people doesn't solve the issue.
No.
right? It only shifts it, right? So people then go to another place or whatever else happens. And so I think the conversation needs to be, like Malika said, is that a lot of those people who are illegal aren't illegal because they have negative intentions and want to be illegal, but it's that the system, right, is not equipped to handle. I mean, for example, we've had backlogs in the country now for the past about 5 years or so of people who have been applying for visas, applying for permits. And so you have families who are now unable to leave, because if they leave, they then get undesirable status. So you end up waiting within the country for your application to come out. And so it really creates this back and forth that I think puts a lot of people in this tricky position.
Babatunde and Ayanda, also Malika, in conversation with my colleague Rahul Tandon.